Welcome, one and all, to the 1 year anniversary episode of this tutorial series. This episode is going to be a little different to what you're used to, as I want to take the opportunity to make some announcements and explore another concept that I believe is crucial to releasing a game. Roughly 365 days ago, the first episode of this tutorial went live on YouTube, where I set out to teach Unreal Engine 4 in a slow and steady approach. It turns out there were a lot of people looking for tutorials that took the time to explain each and every little detail, no matter how tedious it seemed in the moment. This was followed by an episode every week at almost the exact same time, which is still going up till today, the 53rd episode. As much as that is an achievement, this is only the beginning, and I plan to keep going indefinitely. Even after I've reached the end of my own knowledge, there's always more to learn and thus teach. There's been lots of positive feedback with the community that is starting to form, and some of those positive comments have inspired me to keep going, even when life tried to get in the way, as it always seems to do. I'd encourage all of you to keep asking questions and making requests for the topics you'd like to see covered in the future. For the first announcement today, I've joined Patreon. A lot of you may have noticed that the link has been there at the end of the videos for quite some time. However, the page is now fully functional. There is no pressure to donate if you don't have the means. Tutorials are still going up every week and comments will still be responded to on YouTube. However, for those of you who are in a position to contribute, one of the benefits included leads to the second announcement today, the official Be Original Studios Discord server. This will be the best place for not only the community to work with each other, but for me to interact with each of you, especially when it comes to troubleshooting your own projects. Next up, I've been doing a podcast with my co-host in life, Lost Beyond Pluto. We discuss a multitude of topics that I wouldn't normally talk about on this channel, so if you're curious about the person you've been listening to behind the microphone for the last year, feel free to head on over to Lost Beyond Pluto and have a listen. This episode seemed like the perfect time to do another purely theory-based episode, especially seeing as the more complicated these tutorials get, the more urgently the following topic needs to be addressed. The theme of today's topic will be, how many people do you need to release a game? Right from the beginning, we should define what sort of game we're talking about. If you're thinking about creating a role-playing game or RPG, then it's pretty safe to assume that you don't have small dreams in mind. After all, the nature of most RPGs are grand in scale, and even the smaller games are still packed with lots of details that give the world life. This is a concept that can be difficult to accept. In today's modern age, the idea of doing things by ourselves and not seeking help is seen as the right way or the noble way. But when it comes to designing games, unfortunately, it's not entirely feasible, at least for the larger games. If you want to make a smaller game, then you probably have the entire team you need already, yourself. However, large games are absolutely monstrous when it comes to production. To create some context, when you're done with this video, search the credits of one of your favorite games and look at just how many people made it. If you're a smartass, you probably picked a game that had a notoriously small development team. But most games exceed over 100 people on the development team as the norm. As a quick summary of some of the roles these enormous teams need to fulfill, we have programmers, which is the role we're currently most familiar with, telling the game how it should behave given each circumstance. Under that umbrella, there are also specialty roles, such as a team dedicated just to AI. One lucky break we have using Unreal Engine is that the people who would normally be in charge of maintaining the game engine and fixing bugs are already there. All we have to do is download the latest version. But these are only a handful of roles, and that's only the very beginning. Animators are in charge of creating the animations we see, and their job is quite important because we all know what stiff and unrealistic animations look like, and it's up to this team to ensure that that isn't the case. You can see the finalized work of animators in the arms we borrowed from the shooter project in our animation tutorials. Just to get the arms moving in the manner that they were requires the knowledge of another program altogether, such as Blender or Maya. But if you thought 52 episodes of these tutorials was a long process, imagine how many tutorials you'd have to watch to be a great animator. But animators can't do anything without 3D artists. Those in charge of creating the 3D models we see and the outer shell that the animators interact with. These guys are the ones who decide how every character looks and even how parts of the environment look. The important props, such as a special weapon or artifact, would also be designed by this team that would also be well versed in something like Blender and even work directly with animators. There are some jobs, however, that you could realistically take on, although mastering them would be another thing entirely. Level designers are important for how each level flows. It's up to them to make sure that we can not only get from point A to B, but also take our breaths away occasionally with incredible landscapes and set pieces. These guys would work directly with another team, lighting. All that fluff about ray tracing is exactly why lighting is ridiculously important and why an entire team is often dedicated to it, because we all know when lighting isn't behaving properly, and it can easily be the difference between a generation of consoles and games. While we all have a story in our heads for the game we want to create, there is often an entire team of story writers who work together to create the narratives we play through. They will often storyboard key moments in a game, which then leads on to 2D artists creating the artwork of the game for the 3D artists to model later and the animators to give the final breath of life. The lucky thing about starting as a recording studio is that the role of audio engineer is something that I have a head start in. But even with over a decade of music and audio knowledge, I can tell you that game development is its own thing when it comes to audio design. We've all heard a misplaced sound effect or musical score in a game before. The entire reason I started a recording studio at all was wanting to see the songs I write come to life, as well as help others achieve the same goal. Even still, writing music for a game is completely different to a standard song. Even comparing game composers and movie composers isn't straightforward, as both mediums have vastly different requirements. And even if you wanted to fulfill both of those roles by yourself, voice actors are beyond important. If you've ever wondered why games back in the 80s and 90s had horrible voice acting, it's because a lot of the developers had to do it themselves due to budget restraints. And once you have a voice actor, having a decent director to give them context about a character that they may not have even seen or know anything about is crucial to a believable performance. None of this is to discourage you from making a game, and I believe that some of you will want to fulfill some of these roles on your own. However, the reality is, at the very least, every game will need a small team of people to see it to completion. The purpose of this episode is to encourage you to start building your own team. Don't be stubborn like I was once upon a time, assuming that I could do everything myself and not considering that even if that was possible, the quality of the game created may have been greatly diminished just because finding talented people with the same dream seemed like a daunting task. Here's hoping that you've taken something away from this and that by the time you're watching episode 104 in a year's time, you'll have at the very least a short list of people who share your passion for making a game. Perhaps some of you might even have working prototypes that are almost ready to go into alpha. If you've made it this far in the video, thanks for sticking around. For those of you who are watching these tutorials as they come out and can't just scroll through to see what the next episode is about, I'm happy to announce that we'll be starting the highly requested inventory next time. But get ready and buckle up, because this one's going to be tricky. I'll see you all next week.